The wind carried the smell of burned sage and dust across the empty plains as the sun slipped low behind the ridges, bleeding orange light into the fading sky. The war had ended, but for Sergeant Luke Harlow, peace was a word that carried no meaning. His hands still shook when the thunder rolled, and at night, the screams of his fallen brothers tore him awake before the dawn could reach him. He had buried friends, brothers, and even the man he used to be out there in those red canyons where soldiers and Apache warriors hunted each other like ghosts. Now, months after the last battle, he found himself stationed alone at a remote outpost, guarding the edge of a reservation settlement the Army had built to contain the Apache survivors. One evening, under the fading light, he heard a rustle by the corral, his rifle raised on instinct, and his heart pounded with that familiar edge between fear and violence. But what stepped out wasn't a raider, it was a woman. Her wrists were bound loosely, her dark hair tangled with dust and defiance, her eyes deep with something that looked like both hate and sorrow. "She's one of them," said the corporal who brought her in. "Caught stealing supplies." Luke said nothing. The corporal dumped her near the barn and spat in the dirt before riding off, leaving Luke with the duty to watch her until morning. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the flickering lantern and the whisper of wind through the barn slats. Luke sat near the entrance, his rifle laid across his lap, while she remained by the wall, her gaze locked on him, not afraid, not pleading, just watching. "You got a name?" he asked finally, his voice dry from the dust. She said nothing. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't think so." Hours passed. Outside, coyotes cried into the dark. Luke poured himself a cup of coffee from the tin pot, the bitter steam rising into the cold air. He glanced at her again. She hadn't moved. "You hungry?" he muttered, tossing a biscuit toward her feet. She looked at it, then back at him. "If you're waiting for me to turn around, I ain't stupid," he said. Her lips curled faintly, the first sign of expression he'd seen. "You think I need you to turn your back?" she replied, her voice low but strong, the accent sharp and melodic. The sound of it startled him. He hadn't expected her to speak English. "So you do talk," he said. "Sometimes. What's your name?" he asked again. She paused. "Nita," she said finally. The word rolled soft and strong, like a prayer spoken into the wind. Luke nodded. "I'm Luke." He waited for her to answer, but she didn't. She was looking past him, out the barn door toward the stars just starting to appear. For a long while, neither spoke. Later that night, as the cold deepened, Luke noticed her shivering. Her clothes were torn, thin from days in the wild. He stood, took off his army coat, and laid it near her. She didn't move to take it. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said quietly. "I don't hurt women." Her eyes flashed in the lantern light, steady and proud. "Men always say that before they do," she said. He froze, the words striking him like a bullet. He turned away, staring at the rifle propped beside him. "I ain't like the others," he said after a moment. "Haven't slept beside a woman since the war." Maybe I forgot how his voice cracked, soft with exhaustion and truth. Nita didn't answer, but for the first time, her gaze softened just slightly. She reached for the coat and pulled it around her shoulders. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore, it was human. Two souls who had seen too much, sharing the same broken air. As dawn crept through the slats of the barn, Luke found himself still awake, watching the light catch on the dust motes. Nita was asleep, her head resting against the wall, his coat wrapped around her. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the war clawing at his chest. The anger, the guilt, they were quiet, like snow settling over a battlefield. He stood, stepped outside, and breathed in the morning. The world was still. Maybe, he thought, peace didn't come from the government or the gun or the orders written on paper. Maybe peace started like this, with silence, with mercy, with two people too tired to hate anymore. He walked back inside, careful not to wake her, and sat again near the doorway. He didn't know what the morning would bring. The officers might come for her, or she might escape when he blinked. But something had already changed in that long night. The man who'd gone to war had died there, but the one sitting here was starting to remember what it felt like to be human. As the camera of the story would slowly fade, Luke's voice would echo softly for the viewers. Sometimes, the hardest battles don't end when the gunfire stops. They end when you find someone who makes you stop fighting yourself. And for everyone watching, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Auto Luxurious Stories, where courage, love, and redemption live in every tale. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps bring light to forgotten souls of the old world. Subscribe now and join us for Chapter 2, where Luke and Nita's fates collide with the storm of justice, loyalty, and forgiveness on the untamed frontier. The morning sun cut through the fog like a knife, turning the plains gold as the distant cry of a hawk echoed above the valley. Luke Harlow stood at the edge of the barn, hat in hand, staring out toward the horizon. He hadn't slept, not really, but it was the first night since the war that hadn't felt like a battlefield inside his mind. Behind him, Nita stirred beneath the coat, her movements slow, cautious, as though her dreams had carried her somewhere far away and she wasn't sure if she'd return to safety or danger. Luke turned as she sat up, her eyes clear and unreadable. "You could have run," he said quietly. "Wouldn't have stopped you." She looked at him for a long moment. "And then what?" she said. "Run until your army finds me again? Until your land swallows me whole?" Her words cut with truth, and Luke could only nod. "Maybe," he said, "but you still could have tried." She shook her head. "I've been running my whole life, soldier. Maybe I wanted to see what happens when I stop." Her gaze met his again, steady, strong, and he felt something shift deep inside. A quiet respect he hadn't felt for anyone in years. They spent the early morning in silence, Luke tending to the horses while Nita watched from the corner of the barn. When he handed her a tin cup of water, she hesitated before taking it. The brief brush of her fingers against his felt like a spark, something small but alive in the ashes of who they'd both been. "You fought in the war," she said suddenly. Luke nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Too long, too hard." "Did you kill my people?" she asked. The question hit him like a bullet to the chest. He froze, eyes fixed on the ground. "I did what I was ordered to," he said finally. "Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it wrong. Just means it's what I carry." Nita's gaze didn't waver. "And does it weigh heavy, that carrying?" Luke looked up at her, the sun catching the scar on his cheek. "Every damn day," he said. For the first time, she saw the cracks in his armor, the pain, the regret, the endless guilt of a man who had outlived too many good souls. By noon, the sound of hooves thundered in the distance. Luke tensed, hand on his rifle, until he saw the dust rising from a small patrol approaching from the south. "They're coming for you," he said, voice low. "The army?" she asked. He nodded. "They'll take you to Fort Kellen. You won't last a week there." Nita stood, her shoulders squaring, pride flickering in her eyes. "Then I will face them like I faced every man before them." But Luke shook his head. "You don't understand. They don't see you as a woman or a warrior. To them, you're just another enemy that never surrendered." Nita's jaw tightened. "And what do you see?" she asked. He paused, then said quietly, "Someone braver than I ever was." The patrol reached the barn by afternoon, 3 soldiers, their uniforms dusty, faces hard from travel. "Sergeant Harlow," the lead officer called. "We're here for the prisoner." Luke stepped outside, body tense. "She's inside," he said. The officer dismounted, pulling a folded order from his coat. "Command wants her questioned in Fort Kellen. Apache raiders have been hitting supply lines again. They think she knows something." Luke's stomach churned. He knew what questioning meant. He'd seen it before. He turned to glance back at Nita, standing just inside the barn doorway, unflinching. The officer followed his gaze and sneered. "Pretty thing, isn't she? Shame her kind never learns." That was all it took. Years of discipline, years of silence shattered like glass. Luke stepped forward, voice sharp as thunder. "You'll treat her with respect, Captain." The officer laughed. "Respect for her." But Luke didn't move his hand from the rifle. "I said what I said." Tension hung heavy in the air. The other soldiers shifted uneasily. The officer scowled, then spat on the ground. "You've gone soft, Harlow. War breaks a man different ways." Luke's voice lowered. "War didn't break me, Captain. It just made me see what's worth saving." The officer's face twisted with disgust. "You'll regret that." He turned and barked an order. The 2 soldiers moved toward Nita, but Luke stepped between them. "No one touches her," he said. His rifle was steady now, eyes burning with a calm kind of fury. The silence was deafening. The soldiers hesitated, torn between orders and the man who'd once led them through hell. "Sergeant, stand down," one said nervously. "You'll hang for this." Luke shook his head slowly. "Then I'll hang knowing I did one thing right." Nita's voice broke through the standoff, quiet but fierce. "Luke." He turned, and in her eyes was something he hadn't seen before. "Trust. You don't have to fight for me," she said. "You've fought enough." Luke swallowed hard. "Maybe, but not for something that mattered." With that, he fired a warning shot into the air. The horses screamed and bolted, the soldiers diving for cover. "Go," Luke shouted. "Run." Nita hesitated, torn between survival and something deeper that tied her to him. Then she turned and fled through the tall grass, vanishing into the golden light. By the time the soldiers regrouped, Luke had dropped his rifle, hands raised. The officer's rage was barely contained. "You just destroyed your career, Harlow," he spat. Luke met his eyes, calm as the dawn. "That's fine," he said. "I already lost everything that mattered in that war." They arrested him, tied his hands, and rode him back toward the fort. But as they crossed the ridgeline, he looked back one last time. In the distance, he thought he saw her, a small figure on the horizon, standing still, watching. Days later, word spread across the valley that Sergeant Harlow had been dishonorably discharged, stripped of rank, and banished from service. Some said he left the fort and vanished into the mountains. Others whispered that he was seen near the reservation, helping Apache families find food and safety. No one knew for sure, but months later, a trader passing through claimed he'd seen an Apache woman and a former soldier living quietly near the edge of the canyon, lands planting corn, tending horses, building a cabin of logs and hope. And on quiet nights, when the moon was full, those who passed by swore they could hear laughter echoing faintly from that cabin. Two souls who had survived hell finally learning what peace felt like. Luke's last written words, found years later in a worn notebook beside his rifle, read, "I haven't slept beside a woman since the war. Not because I couldn't, but because I was waiting for one who made me feel alive again." Turns out, peace don't come from winning battles. It comes from finding the courage to forgive. And for everyone listening to this story right now, if Luke and Nita's journey touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe to Auto Luxurious Stories. Every click, every comment, keeps these tales of redemption, courage, and love alive for the next soul that needs them. Don't just watch, be part of this growing family of dreamers, believers, and storytellers. Subscribe now, and let's keep the frontier spirit alive together.